Well, it is official. Scott Frost has officially been fired by Nebraska. I'm a little bit surprised because I thought that they would wait till after October 1st because his buyout dropped significantly. But no, they had seen enough. Losing to Georgia Southern at home 45-42. Unacceptable. And it's time for Nebraska to move on from one of the worst stretches in program history. And this is such a sad story because Scott Frost came from UCF. They had just won the national championship. Yeah, look in the record books. UCF is labeled as the 2017 national champions. It's even on their stadium. It's a fact. I don't really consider them the national champions, but they can claim that. A national championship in 2017. He goes on to Nebraska. He is a former player, had a lot of success as a former player at Nebraska. Hopes were very, very high for Scott Frost, and for whatever reason, he couldn't get it going. I honestly don't know what happened. Now it's time for Nebraska to look for a new head coach. Who should they go after? Who should they try to get? Well, I mean, Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina, a winning percentage of 62.7%, 31-19 overall, including an 11-1 season in 2020 and an 11-2 season in 2021. They're also off to a great start this year. Jamie Chadwell is a young coach. He's having a lot of success despite not really recruiting at a high level. Maybe Nebraska would provide a great recruiting base and he would have a lot of success at Nebraska. He seems to be a player's coach. I think Jamie Chadwell would be a good fit over there at Nebraska. But are there some better names out there? Who would best fit Nebraska? Well, there's also Tom Herman. I still disagree with Texas firing Tom Herman. And I know Texas just took Alabama to the wire, lost by 1 point at home. But look at last year. They also took Oklahoma to the wire, but that game kept beating them over and over and over and over. So Steve Sarkisian, I still don't think is a good hire. And we'll see if this Alabama loss will beat Texas over and over and over. Or maybe they will have a good season. I don't know. But Tom Herman was actually doing good at Texas. He had a 10-win season, took a slight step back to 8-5, and then went 7-3. Like that is not a good reason to fire Tom Herman. And a lot of Texas fans were like, well, he was saying he was mean to the players. He was not a player's coach. But there was no proof to all these accusations, so it made no sense. I think they were just wanting to get rid of Tom Herman, bring in Steve Sarkisian because they knew that they were headed to the SEC, and Steve Sarkisian was an assistant coach at Alabama for Nick Saban. Oh, okay, so let's connect the dots here. Texas knew that they were going to the SEC when they fired Tom Herman. Make no mistake about that. That idea, that contract, that agreement, whatever you want to call it, that decision wasn't made overnight. It took months and months and months. So when Tom Herman was fired, they knew they were headed to the SEC, and so they thought Steve Sarkisian could be the bridge to the SEC. Same thing that West Virginia did when they brought in Dana Holgorsen. They knew that they were headed to the Big 12. Dana Holgorsen was a Big 12 guy, and so they thought it would be an easy transition. Dana Holgorsen was one of the worst hires ever in the history of West Virginia. It has set our program back a good decade, and it looks like Neal Brown is not the answer. So I might be making a video about Neal Brown getting fired at West Virginia real soon. Matter of fact, I've heard talks behind the scenes trying to negotiate that buyout. West Virginia and Neal Brown might be on the brink of parting ways. You just can't meander and be mediocre and then lose to Kansas. This was supposed to be a big step for this year. But who knows? Maybe Kansas is a great team. All right, let's go back to Scott Frost in Nebraska, right? Replacements. I think Tom Herman would be a great head coach at Nebraska. He recruits at a high level. I don't really believe any of those accusations that I heard from Texas fans because, well, there was no proof. I never saw anything on Twitter, Instagram, any news outlets, nothing. I saw no proof of these generic accusations. I just think they use it as an excuse. And, you know, he did get the buyout because he was fired without just cause. So if there was any substance to these accusations, then they wouldn't owe him a buyout. So that tells you right there that they were flat out lying. So they wanted to move on. But I think Tom Herman would fit in well at Nebraska, great recruited. I think he knows how to have success at a high level. I think he had Texas turning around and they just didn't have enough patience, or they're just plain stupid, to be honest with you. But who else? Well, think about this. This is very interesting. Nebraska could go from Frost to Freeze. I like that storyline. I'm talking about Hugh Freeze at Liberty. Overall, he's 77-39 with a winning percentage of 66.4%. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that Tom Herman overall was 55-22, 71%, including a 13-1 season at Houston in 2015, and then 10-2 in Texas at 2018. All right, back to Hugh Freeze. Overall, 77-39, 3 10-win seasons, 1 at Arkansas State, 1 at Ole Miss, and 1 at Liberty. So he has had a 10-win season at 3 different schools. Bring in Hugh Freeze and have yourself a 10-win season. He will make it 4 teams. I know. This guy actually has had some scandal. But the past is the past. Liberty has given him a second chance, and my gosh, he's a good coach. Liberty was basically an unknown name. Nobody knew who Liberty was. Nobody knew that Liberty had a football team. Well, you know now because Hugh Freeze has brought them into prominence. That they've beaten some big time names, including Coastal Carolina. I actually won that spread pick on that one in that bowl game. That was a great bowl game, by the way. They were supposed to play in the regular season, but because of COVID, it got canceled. Hey, we'll take the bowl matchup, and it was a great bowl matchup, and Hugh Freeze almost gave that game away, but still a great win. So yes, I think Hugh Freeze would be a great head coach at Nebraska. He recruits at a high level. He's an even better players coach than Jamie Chadwell and Tom Herman. He knows how to get the job done, and I do think that he has learned from his past mistakes. I know there's a cloud over him still, and all the accusations and blah, blah, blah. He was fired from Ole Miss for this and that, and I understand that. He doesn't have a great history whenever it comes to his character. But if you look at him now, he's been keeping his nose clean. He's been having a lot of success at Liberty. I mean, that's a great combo. I think Hugh Freeze is a great choice to replace Scott Frost at Nebraska. But I will say, this is a good decision by Nebraska. They didn't wait too long before things got really out of control. I mean, they're firing him before his buyout drops down, so they are committed to success. They're not really worried about the money. I mean, they're making a crap ton of money in the Big Ten anyways, so I like this. I like that they didn't wait till after October 1st. That shows me that they are interested in success and not necessarily just money. Kudos to Nebraska. Now I'm looking at West Virginia. And I know the buyout for Neal Brown is $20 million this year. It drops down to $16.5 million after this season. But man, West Virginia is headed in a downward direction. You don't want to do what you did with Dana Holgorsen. West Virginia kept Dana Holgorsen way too long. I know he had some success, but he brought this program back and he left it in shambles. And Neal Brown just hasn't been the answer. So let's not make the same mistake that we did with Dana Holgorsen and keeping Neal Brown too long, and then the next guy has an even bigger mess to clean up, because that's what this is going to end up being. And for West Virginia, we need somebody, not an unknown name. We need somebody that's proven. I mean, I would go back to the same list. Jamie Chadwell, Hugh Freeze, Tom Herman. I would even think about Jamil Adai, former player and former assistant coach at West Virginia. Should have been named defensive coordinator, but no, Tony Gibson was named defensive coordinator. And, I mean, there for a while, it was working out, but our defense has taken a tremendous step backwards. But Jamil Adai was the #2 recruiter in 2021 and 2022. That is amazing. He would most definitely be able to recruit at West Virginia. And honestly, you look at every place that he has went, he has taken a major player with him. From Arizona to West Virginia, Tony Fields. From West Virginia to Georgia, Tyke Smith. From Georgia to Miami, well, he doubled down and took Hakeem Mesidor from West Virginia. So he knows how to get those players to come with him. So Jamil Adai would definitely attract some attention and some big-time athletes. And I think he would be a good head coach, because if you've looked at every defense that he has gone to, the defense has improved dramatically. In 2020, West Virginia had a top 5 defense with him as a defensive backs coach. Same thing with Georgia last year. Probably the best defense in history with him as the DB coach. And I know he's not the defensive coordinator, but it follows him. So there has to be something there. At minimum, he needs to be a defensive coordinator somewhere. I think he deserves a shot at a head coach. So West Virginia needs to think about that. So let me know in the comments section. Number 1, who do you think replaces Scott Frost? Number 2, when West Virginia does finally fire Neal Brown, who replaces Neal Brown? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.